In this lecture, I am going to discuss about template driven form in Angular. We have this add new post button inside our post create.component.html file. Now I will add a form here with input element to enter post data. I already prepared some code for our post create form, so I will copy this code and paste that code inside this post create.component.html file. Here I am using these bootstrap classes to design our post create form, and here we have this input field for title, this text area for description, we have this select field for category, and we have this input field for author and for the image URL, and we have this checkbox for feature product, and we have this submit button here. After saving the file, let's check the browser. You see we have this beautiful form to enter post data. Now to make this form as a form group in Angular, we need to add ngForm directive to this form tag. Before adding ngForm directive, we have to make sure that we have imported form modules inside our modules imports array. So we have these form modules inside our app modules imports array, so that we can use ngForm directive to our form tag. So let's add ngForm directive to this form tag to make this form as a form group, and then I'll store this ngForm instance to a template variable called post form. This is actually a template reference variable, and now I'll display the form controls values of this form group with the help of this template reference variable. So let's display the form controls values. Let's use JSON pipe for JSON representation. Now if I check the browser, you see we have this blank object because we have this form group here, right? But under this form group we don't have any form control. We have this input field and we have this text area, we have this category, select field, but these input fields are not registered to this form group as a form control. To register this input field as a form control to this form group, what we need to do, we need to add name property, let's say name title, and then we need to add ngModel directive to this input field. Then only this input field will register as a form control to this form group. Now if I check the browser, you see now we have this title here with initial value blank, and if I change the value here, you see the value is changing. We can also link this input field to the properties of our component class. So let's say inside our component class we have a new property called title of type string, and the initial value, let's say test title, and now we are going to bind this property to our input field with the help of ngModel. So let's bind it with this ngModel. So this will be ngModel, and then we need to provide the property name here. So the property name here is title, right? Now save the file and check the browser. You see we have this default value for the title, and the value here also changing. So this is how we can make two-way binding. I'm not going to use this two-way binding here. I'm going to use this form control only. So I added name property and ngModel to make this input field as a form control to this form group, right? Now I will add the name and ngModel directive to all the other input fields. So let's add name property to this description field, and then let's add name and ngModel directive to this category select field, and then let's add name and ngModel directive to this author field, and then let's add name and ngModel directive to this image URL field, and then the last one is for feature product. Let's add the name and ngModel directive to make this input field as a form control. Okay, now let's check the browser. You see we have the input field, and let's provide the value. You see values are changing, right? So that is how we can register the input field as a form control to the form group, right? Now I'm going to tell you how we can add validation rules to our template driven form. So let's say to this input field I'm going to add required rules, and we can add this with the help of attribute or directive in Angular. So let's add required rules here, and let's add the required rules for the description field and for the category field and for the author and also for the image URL. We do not want to need or we do not need to add required rules for this checkbox. Okay, now refresh the browser and submit the form. We did not add any submit handler, right? So let's add a submit handler to our post form. So whenever our post form will submit, so let's add a submit handler. So whenever our post form will submit, we'll call one event called add new post, which we already have inside our post create component.ts file, right? So let's bind it to this ng submit handler. Okay, so whenever our post form will submit, this add new post method will call, and inside this add new post we have this code. So let's comment out this code, and for now what I will do, I will simply console log some message called submitted. Let's say submitted. Save the file, and if I submit the form and check the console, you see we are getting this message. We have added the validation rules, right? Still our form is submitting, right? So but we do not want to add the post whenever our form is invalid, right? But in this method or in this component class, how we will check the form status? So we can check that form status with the help of this template reference variable. We have this post form, right? So how we can get this post form inside this component class? We can get this with the help of viewChild decorator. So let's add viewChild decorator here, and inside this viewChild decorator we need to provide the template variable name, which is post form, and I'll store it to a local variable called post form, and this will be type of ng form. So let's add ng form here, ng form, and now inside this add new post method we can check the form status, right? So how we can check the form status? We can check the form status with this local variable where I'll store the ng form instance of our post form, right? So let's say this dot post form dot valid. Okay, so the code inside this block will execute whenever our post form will be valid, and in the else part, let's say we'll display some messages in the console. Let's say invalid form, right? And inside this block, let's say valid form. Now if I submit the form, you see we are getting invalid form, right? But we are not getting any validation error messages inside our template, right? So even we are leaving the form, leaving the field without entering any value, we are not getting any validation error messages, right? And we are able to submit the form, right? So what we can do to display the validation error messages? So let's say we have a div and we want to display the validation error messages inside this div of class text danger. Okay, this is a bootstrap class to make the text in red color. Okay, and let's say the error message here will be please enter post title, and let's check the browser. You see we are getting this message all the time, but this message will only be displayed whenever our title field will be invalid and our title field will be touched or dirty, right? So this message will display only whenever our title field will be invalid and will be touched or dirty. So how we can check the input field status, right? So we can check the input field status with the help of our template reference variable. So we have this post form, right? And we are going to check the status of our title field. So how we will go to this title field? Post form dot controls, and then we are going to check the status of our title field. and we're going to check the invalid status. So whenever this input field will be invalid and our title field will be touched or dirty, then only we will display this message, right? So let's say postform.form.controls.title.dirty or postform.form.control.title.touched. Then only we will display this validation error messages. Now check the browser. You see, whenever we are entering something and we are removing the text, you see we are getting the validation error messages, right? So this is how we can display the validation error messages in template driven form in Angular. Okay, now suppose, okay, before that let's add validation, or let's display validation messages for all the other fields. Let's say whenever our description field will be invalid and description field will be touched. Okay, so this will be post form, not description. Okay, so whenever our description field will be invalid or description field will be touched or dirty, then we will display these error messages. So this will be please enter post description. This is a long syntax, right? So how we can get the form control in shortcut way? So we can store the form control to a local template reference variable, right? With this hash, and then let's say the template reference variable name is title, and we can store the ng model. And now we can access the title form control with this title template reference variable. So we do not want to write this code here, so we simply can access the title form control with this title template reference variable, and then similarly we can add template reference variable for the description here also. Yes, description is equal to ng model, and we can access the description form control with this template reference variable, right? Now we need to add the validation error messages for the other field, like we need to add the validation error messages for this category field. So let's add template reference variable for this category field also. This will be category, and we need to modify this also. This will be category, and this will be category, and this will be please select one category. And then let's add validation messages for the author field. Let's add template reference variable for author field here. So this will be author, and we need to provide the form control here to check the status of the form control, and this will be please enter post author. And then let's add the validation messages for image URL. So let's add template reference variable for image URL to this input field, and this will be image URL, and we need to provide the image URL form control here to check the status of image URL, and the message here will be please enter post image URL. So I added validation messages for all the fields, and so we need to provide a value for this option, right? So we need to provide a blank option. So whenever we will choose this, we will get the validation messages. You see, we are getting validation messages for all the fields, right? But suppose we have two rules to a input field, then how we will display the different messages for different rules? let's say for our title field we have a mean length rules, mean length of 3 characters. Then how we will check that? So this code will execute whenever our input field will be invalid or input field will be touched or dirty. And inside this block, what we can check the record rules. Okay, so how we'll check the record rules? We can check the record rules with this our title dot errors, and then we need to provide the rules here. So let's say whenever our title input fields record rules will be break, then only we will display the message here. So this message will display only whenever our record rules will break, and whenever our mean length rule will break, then we will provide different message. Okay, so let's say mean length here, and please enter post title of mean characters in scat 5 or 6. What is the character? 3, right? Mean characters 3. Please enter post title of 3 cax. Okay, save the file and check it. You see, we are getting different messages for different rules, right? So we successfully display the validation messages here, right? But you see, we can still submit the form, right? But whenever our form will be invalid, we do not want to submit the form. Then how we will disable this form submit button? So we can disable the submit button simply by checking the form status, right? So let's say this button will be disable. Let's say disable whenever our post form dot invalid. That means whenever our post form will be invalid, then this button will be disabled. So let's check the code now. Let's check the browser now. You see, our button is disabled. Now let's provide some data here. Let's provide valid data here, and let's submit the form. You see, we are getting valid form console messages, right? So now we need to perform some action here to add the data, add the post data. We already created the post in the previous lecture, right? So we can simply use this code here. So let's say we have the post title hard-coded here, right? But we are not going to use hard-coded data. Then how we will get the dynamic data from the input field? So we can get the dynamic data with the help of this post form, right? So we'll get the post title here. So this dot post form dot value dot title, and then for the description we will provide the description value, and this will be this dot post form dot value dot description. Then this will be this dot post form dot value dot author. This is actually the name of our input field. Whatever the name we mentioned here, we need to provide that. Okay, and then for the image URL, we'll simply provide the image URL from this dot post form dot value dot image URL, and from the is feature, what we'll check is feature. If is feature is exists, then this will be true or this will be false. Okay, and for the category, similarly we can get it from the form group, right? And for the ID and for the created date, what we need to do, we need to provide the current date in YYYMMDD format, and for the ID we can simply pass randomly generated ID. So how we can generate randomly generated ID? So let's say ID is equal to, and we can generate with the help of math dot random and the random plus 1, and then let's say to string, and then inside this to string let's provide 36 and let's say we want to get 10 characters, then let's provide 10 under this inside this substring method, and then let's provide this value here as the id. And for the current date, what we can do, we can get it with the help of date library, new.date.toIOS string, and then we need to call slice, and we'll take 0 to 10 character. Okay, and after generating this post object, we need to pass this post object to our post service.addPost method, which I already created in the last lecture. And after that, what we need to do, we need to clear our form values, right? So how we will clear our form values? We can simply reset our form with this form group. So let's reset the form here. Let's say this .postForm.reset. Let's call this method, and now simply I will alert a message. Let's say post created. Now it's time to check the functionality. So let's provide one dummy title. Let's say test description. Let's say category sports. Let's say author image URL. Let's say this one, and this picture is equal to true. Now you see we have these 3 posts. Submit the form, post created, form is reset, right? And we have this new post with the value I entered, right? So we successfully used template driven form to get the data. In the next lecture, I will tell you how we can create custom validator in our template driven form with the help of custom directive. So I will check the image URL. So to check image URL, I will create a custom validator in our template driven form. So stay connected.